In closing today, I'd like to give honor to and somewhat eulogize for my great-grandfather who passed away this past week at the age of 98. His name was Lester, but some called him LT. 5 boys called him Dad, and a bunch of grandchildren and great-grandchildren like myself called him Papaw. His life was absolutely legendary. He was born in the 1920s here in Tennessee, so he grew up during a very difficult time, the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl. He was undoubtedly poor. He met his wife on Gay Street here in Knoxville, Alma Jean. We called her Mimi. They would go on to have 5 boys and be married for almost 70 years. Yes, that's 7 decades. There are so many unbelievable stories from his life, which we didn't really learn until later in life, which is sort of the case with the greatest generation. They kind of kept their stories to themselves, especially concerning war or hardship. But I'll share a few of these things just to demonstrate. As a child, Papaw's dad owned a barbershop. His name was Joe Varnes, and so this would be my great-great-grandfather. And Papaw would shine shoes in the barbershop. Well, one day a group of gangsters dropped in, and in walked in one of the most wanted men in America at the time, a certain man, John Dillinger. So my great-great-grandfather gave John Dillinger a cut and shave while Papaw shined some shoes, and maybe his shoes. When Papaw was a teenager, he played bass in a family band where his father was the lead singer and also the fiddle player. They were called Joe Varnes and the East Tennessee Hillbillies. I actually have some recordings of them playing, which is amazing. But my great-great-grandfather's fiddle was entirely made out of matchsticks, and because for that reason, it was held in the Museum of Appalachia for a while. Though I think that they've sold it by now. When my Papaw got a little bit older, he and Alma Jean, my Mimi, they eloped to Georgia to get married. They rode down to a wedding chapel in Georgia with some friends in the back of a decommissioned Army ambulance. And when they were standing in line to pay the clerk, I guess, of the wedding chapel, there was a couple in front of them that when they were told the price, which was $7, the man looked at the woman and back at the clerk and said, "Shoot, she ain't worth that," and then left the chapel. But Mimi and Papaw got married and came back to Knoxville. After the United States entered the Second World War, Papaw joined the Navy and was initially stationed in Hawaii, but ended up right in the middle of everything in Japan, apparently. Now, one of the greatest fighter pilots of that time was a man named Pappy Boyington, Medal of Honor and Navy Cross recipient. He made life very difficult for many of the Japanese pilots. Papaw was the person foremost responsible for the maintenance of his plane, like the plane captain or the crew chief, and the only one Pappy entrusted to do so. At some point in the 80s, Papaw was getting off of an elevator in New York City and physically ran into Donald Trump. I could go on and on with these stories, but the man almost made it to 100 years old. I've thought a lot about how he was able to live such a long life, and I've boiled it down to 5 things. So here's my 5 tips for a long life based on Lester's life. Number 1 is that he never technically retired. He worked well into his 80s. I think he was around 85 until he just physically could not work anymore. And just a little lesson here. I think that retirement is largely detrimental to our senior citizens. Yes, some of those will busy themselves with hobbies, but a lot of seniors will head into just leisure and they expedite the end of their life because they lose purpose and brain activity and physical labor, etc. So don't retire. Work as long as you can because work is good for you. It's not bad for you. Number 2 is that he never drank alcohol and almost exclusively drank black coffee. Alcohol is basically poison for your body and mind. And whatever health benefits that you've heard are all, entirely offset by the long-term negative effects associated with moderate or severe alcohol consumption. I love black coffee, and maybe that had something to do with Lester's long life. Third, Papaw always ate very, very well. And of course, I'm talking about when he was adult, because as a child, not many in these parts had very much to eat, but there was no such thing as a diet. He ate whatever Mimi made, which was delicious Southern cooking. Yes, he had a pot belly on him as long as I knew him. But the point is, there was no diet or exercise to elongate his life. In fact, it was the opposite. Number 4 is important, and one of my favorite things about my Papaw, I never saw him in a sour mood. In fact, his kids will tell you that they never heard him raise his voice or saw him get angry. And I have to say that's partly because his wife was quite the pistol, a feisty woman if there ever was one. But I so looked forward to being around my Papaw because he always sought to make people laugh. He was a wellspring of jokes. His sense of humor was unlike anyone else I've ever known. And I truly think that having that comical, positive, lighthearted view of life has vastly understated health benefits. You've heard the old saying that laughter is the best medicine. Well, Lester's life can definitely attest to that. And finally, the 5th tip is a combination of a couple things. Papaw always worked very hard, which we've already talked about, but he embodied something that most people in modernity do not have, and that is contentment. I never heard him complain. He took care of his family and lived a simple life for nearly 100 years. He was married to one woman for almost 70 years. I think he worked for Sears for something like 30 years. And you just compare this to people today who are extremely spoiled, who constantly complain about almost everything. They have to have a better this or that. They can't hold down a job for any time. They end their marriages or just don't get married at all. They don't have any children, etc. And part of the reason I feel like Papaw was generally an easygoing, positive, funny, yet hardworking guy, contentment is the key to happiness. Contentment. If you don't have contentment, you'll never truly be happy. You'll always be left wanting more. Contentment is the key to happiness. For Papaw, though, I think his contentment and personality was molded by life and experience. I've thought a lot about the cyclicality of history. That history goes in waves and cycles and unfortunately repeats itself because we don't learn from our mistakes and the mistakes of others. But there's a saying that perfectly describes this, and it ties in perfectly to this story. My Papaw was born into horrible economic times in America. He fought in a war. He had to take care of his own mother, who suffered from tuberculosis as a child. Hard times make strong men. Okay, just watch this cycle. Hard times make strong men. Strong men make good times. All right? Think about the condition of our country post-World War II. Okay? So, hard times make strong men. Strong men make good times. Good times make weak men. And weak men make hard times. And this is the season that we're entering into right now as we speak. But my Papaw, Lester Varnes, was born into very hard times, making him an incredibly strong man, whose generation created wonderful times for people in America and around the world, but the consecutive generations begotten had it made in the shade. We got to take it easy, and we didn't pay attention. So here we are. Now, his graveside service was on Monday this week. I was incredibly moved by the active duty service members and honor guard that came. The 21-gun salute and taps is very moving if you've never witnessed that. The American flag draped over his casket was then carefully and meticulously folded and given to my great uncle, who's the oldest living son. It was great, but it was an example of the last of a bygone era in an almost entirely lost generation. Papaw fought in a world war to preserve liberty in the United States, which solidified my freedom to do exactly what I'm doing right now. So, Papaw, though you rarely said it, we love you, and we're thankful for the man and the exemplary human you were. So long for now. Thanks for watching this clip. Listen, I want to make sure that you stay informed on the news and the biblical response to it. So do yourself and us a favor and hit the subscribe button before you go. And then we would love for you to go and check out WeTheFreeShow.com to grab yourself some merch to spread the word about We The Free. And also, we're going to put a video on the screen right now that we think that you'll enjoy. Now, go and be that salt and light, and we'll see you next time.